And before we move on, if you haven't already done so, I'd like to remind you to please silence your cell phones. I want to make sure I've done it for mine. Now, if you will please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to start with acknowledgments of our sponsors. First, our visionary sponsor, Jennifer Anderson and her husband, Phil. And by the way, today is the swearing-in ceremony for the new mayor of Winter Park, Sheila Anderson. Sheila, I love that. Let's merge them all. Sheila DeCiccio, and Phil will be swearing her in. There will be a reception for Sheila at 2:30.
Yes.
At Commission Chambers, City Hall.
Second floor.
Second floor, and at 3:30, the swearing-in ceremony will begin. So if any of you can join the team and wish the best to Sheila and thank Phil for his incredible work in the 3 years he's been mayor of Winter Park, please do join them. I'd also like to thank our bronze sponsors. We have Lynn and Dave Berelsman, and Voting Voices, Charlie Williams, Michelle Levy, Lori and Richard Wack. Thank you all for your support, and if you would please stand so that we can all acknowledge you. We really appreciate your support. Jennifer, thank you. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, I'd love to chat with you about it. You can also email me at vp@lwvoc.org. We will now take a few minutes to acknowledge our elected officials in the room. So if you are an elected official or someone who's running for office, we invite you to the mic to my left. If you would come now, we'd like you to please briefly introduce yourself with your name, your title, and your office. We do ask the audience to please hold applause and any responses until the end, and we ask the speakers to please not give a speech. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Monique Worrell. I'm the elected state attorney for Orange and Osceola counties. It is a pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon. I think it's afternoon now. And I am going to not give a speech, but again, thank you for allowing me to be in the room. It is an honor and a privilege, and I look forward with interacting with those of you who I haven't had an opportunity to speak with yet. Thank you so much.
Let's please hold applause until the end, please.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Vanos, and I am running for Orange County School Board District 6.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Bain. I'm a league member here with you all. I'm also the state attorney for the Ninth Judicial Circuit, running for election in this November's race. And glad to be back here with you all. As usual, great dinner, great lunch, I'm sorry, and great family and great community. So I look forward to speaking with you all throughout this whole election season and beyond. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Marty Sullivan. I'm a commissioner for the city of Winter Park, and welcome to our event center.
Good morning, I'm Todd Weaver. I'm also a Winter Park City Commissioner, and I want to wish you all a pleasant day. And I'm sorry we're all inside because the weather is just so awesome outside. And I'm also looking forward to Mayor-elect DeCicio's inauguration this afternoon, and I hope you can join us. Thank you.
I want to be one of those two guys. My name is Jason Johnson. I am running for Winter Park City Commission, seat 2, the seat that was vacated by Mayor-elect Sheila DeCiccio. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Carmen Torres. I'm running for State Senate District 25, which is my husband's seat that he's vacating. Unfortunately, he can't run but 2 terms, so I will be replacing him. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Melissa Vickers. I'm running for Public Defender in Orange and Osceola counties. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Robin Dellinger. If any of you live in Seminole County, I'm running for Seminole County School Board. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Phil Diamond, and I am the Orange County Comptroller.
Nice. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Winter Park, District 42. We're so honored to have you with us today. My name is Ana Villascamani, proudly serving as your State House Representative, and of course, running for one more term in the Florida House this year, and just so grateful to serve you and looking forward to today's conversation as well. Thank you to the League, always.
Well, today's forecast is sunny, warm, and somewhat clear, just as we'd expect in the Sunshine State, but we will have no need for sun protection today because of our shady topic and little clouds rolling in from the unsunshine state. We have a hazy forecast for Florida sunshine laws. Our government is required by law to be transparent. It is, after all, the best way to hold government accountable. But Florida's 1967 Sunshine Law is becoming unglued at the seams. There have been a whopping 1,200 exemptions signed into law. And now some local and state officials are simply refusing to comply with the law. The result? With more and more restrictions for people like us to have access to public meetings and records, we are increasingly left in the shade. And to moderate this shady topic today, we are so happy to have Beth Cassip with us. Beth spent 20 years at the Orlando Sentinel, where she wrote a very popular column that covered politics, education, business, the courts, and local government. She has also appeared on local and national TV. Beth has a passion for telling the stories of the people and organizations who have helped define Orange County, but in her present role as editor, she has taken the Winter Park voice to new heights. Let's give a sunny and warm welcome to Beth Cassip.
Thanks, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. I always enjoy the League lunches, and this topic is particularly near and dear to my heart. It's been a central part of my career, and it certainly remains so today. So I'd like to start by introducing our panelists. I'm happy to say these are friends of mine and people I respect greatly here in Central Florida journalism. First, we have Leslie Postal. She covers K-12 education for the Orlando Sentinel. She has written about controversies involving Florida's school voucher programs, inequities in the state's Bright Futures program, and school book bans resulting from new state laws. She previously worked at newspapers in Virginia. Welcome, Leslie. So we also have Mike DeForest, and I think you all can come up when you're ready to do so. And Mike is an Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter who has been covering Central Florida news for more than 2 decades. Since joining News 6, Mike has covered some of the biggest news events in Central Florida, from hanging chads to hurricanes to shuttle launches to the trials of Casey Anthony and George Zimmerman. So thanks so much for being here, Mike. And we've also got Bobby Block, another friend for so long. Bobby's executive director now of the Florida First Amendment Foundation, the former managing editor of Florida Today. Block's career in journalism and advocacy spans 4 decades. He contributed to the Wall Street Journal's coverage of 9/11, which earned a 2002 Pulitzer Prize for breaking news, and has also reported on conflicts around the world. He is co-author of the book Disaster, Hurricane Katrina, and the Failure of Homeland Security. So thanks so much, Mike. Or excuse me, Bobby.
I like the way we're separated.
Yeah, it looks like we're still following social distancing here somehow. Everyone's going to be safe. All right, so I appreciate our timekeeper. That's going to be really helpful, so we'll keep our questions and answers moving along. I'll remind everyone that there will be opportunity for audience Q&A in just a few minutes. First, I just want to reiterate some of what Lee said. Florida does have a long history of really leading the way nationally on public records and government transparency. But we have really seen, especially during the course of my career, what started as a slow erosion of that principle, and it's really now a much, much faster destruction of the best tools the public has to hold their government and elected officials accountable. So we're going to explore kind of the current landscape we're in, how we got here, and what's really important to me, if you all take one thing away here, is that while this panel up here is filled with journalists, I can't emphasize enough how these laws are important to so many people, to all of us, not just journalists. They're very important to everyday people, and we're going to hear a lot about why the average person should absolutely care about these laws and what we can start to do about it. So, all right, so we're going to come forward with some questions now. All right, so Bobby, I want to start with you, with the First Amendment Foundation. Such an amazing work done by this foundation. You were on the front lines of battling some of the worst changes to our sunshine laws during the legislative session and all year long. The session just ended in March this year. What's the worst thing that happened this year, and what's the best thing that happened this year? Let's just start with that.
Okay, boy, that's a big question. Okay, in a nutshell, the First Amendment Foundation used to only do open government and access to public records. We were founded by the newspaper industry, and the importance to the newspaper industry for public records has always been there. But in the last year and almost a half since I've taken over, we've expanded into freedom of speech issues, which are increasingly under assault. So the best thing that happened this year, we'll start there, was that a law which would have undermined defamation died. A law that would have criminalized protest on campuses didn't go anywhere. Marcy's law, which prevents which the police have managed to use to prevent the names of officers involved in violence or shootings of individuals, to not release their names. That was overturned by the Supreme Court, and they weren't allowed. An attempt to revive it didn't happen. The worst thing that happened this year was 18 more exemptions added to the list of exemptions that last year I think reached 22. We are imagine the old camel with the straws, or the old death by 1,000 cuts. Each new exemption bleeds the body of public records laws. So it's cumulative. The cumulative effect of these things are bad. The other thing, there were several other bad pieces of legislation that passed. A social media law for teens that's unconstitutional. A law that would prevent people from getting within 25 feet of first responders at crime or scenes, which the law is very vague, and you could see people saying, no filming, which is a violation of First Amendment rights. The problem is that what we see, though, there were two bills that were introduced by Democrats that meant to answer some of the problems with public records laws, and they never really advanced anywhere. And that was also a shame. And I'll be coming back to legislation next time when I have more time.
Yeah, and if we could just take one more second, let's just level set. We've alluded to this slow erosion and now a faster destruction over time. Am I right? We're up to at least 1,200 exemptions?
We're pushing 1,200 exemptions.
Okay,
right
so
now.
1,200 exemptions now to the law. And so can you just sort of say hard to say in a nutshell, but how have you seen this change over the last 20 or so years here in Florida?
The change, I want to stress very importantly, and we'll get to this, public records and open government is not about journalists. Journalists tend to use it more often than everyone else, but really everyone at some point somewhere down the line, you end up needing records, whether it's a death certificate or whatever. The problem is that you could find a correlation as the news industry, particularly the newspaper industry, started to decline. Its ability to sue, which is the only way you have to kind of enforce the laws, declined as well. And once the teeth kind of left, and as a result, a lot of our records laws are not very well policed, they're not very well enforced, and they have been gradually weakening. And we gave the legislature the right to amend the laws to keep up with time. Unfortunately, they've been running amok, and we're living in reality in a single party state right now, so no one ever imagines supermajorities, so that's what's happening.
So, and that really provides some good context for the next question, which is, I think, with every administration here in Florida, we've seen changes. And Mike, I wanted to turn to you because you've done a lot of reporting on this. Tell us a little bit about how Governor DeSantis is handling some of these requests. What's standing out to you about this governor?
Well, I want to start out. It's possible, very likely, prior gubernatorial administrations were doing, but it was about a year ago I was able to find documented proof of how this administration is intervening and delaying the release of public records. And why delays are so important is because news delayed is news denied. And I know that I'm speaking as a journalist here, but we need this information as soon as possible before decisions are made, before votes are cast, before actions are taken. And so the sooner you get it, I think we're better off as a society. If it gets delayed, it's one way that the elected officials can hide this information, but it deprives the voters and the citizens of that information. Just to kind of explain how the process normally works and still works to this day. When you submit a public records request to a state agency like the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the Department of Children and Families, Fish and Wildlife Commission, our state licensing agency, DBPR, you would submit that request directly to the state agency, and then a record custodian who works for that state agency will retrieve the record, get it out of a cardboard box or a shelf, or most likely a computer hard drive, and then go through and redact, black out the information that is exempt from release, social security numbers, credit card numbers, and the 1,200 other exemptions. And that can be a part of what draws this process out. Normally then, after the record is retrieved and redacted, that custodian for that state agency will give it to the person who requested it. And that does happen in most cases. But what we found out about a year ago is that in certain high-profile cases, records that are requested and records involving the governor, before the state agency, after they compile it, before they give it to the citizen who requests it, they send it off to the governor's office for what was called a secondary review for the governor's lawyers to review this. Coincidentally, just a couple of weeks ago, I was able to ask the governor about this directly, and he said, that's not me, I'm not doing it, it's my staff are the ones who are doing this. And they will argue that because he is the head of the executive branch, he has a right to do this. But what we found in some cases is these records were sitting in the governor's office for weeks, sometimes months. One particular one was a reporter for a Tampa Bay TV station requested some records from the Department of Children and Families. And we could see it went over to the governor's office and sat there for 9 months before it was returned to DCF to then give back to the reporters. So it is a challenge, and we're talking hundreds of record requests, primarily made by journalists, but there were some citizens as well. So that is something that, if it was being done in the past, we got you. We now see you're doing it. And is that legal? I'm not a lawyer. What all I can tell you is the Florida Supreme Court, I think back in the 70s, found that the only delay in releasing public records is the time it takes that custodian to retrieve the record off the shelf and then make those redactions. No other delays.
All right, thank you. And Leslie, you do this kind of work every single day. You and I have worked together on a lot of things and have run into these issues. But tell us, and I know you primarily deal in the world of education, which is really close to so many families. Give us an example of something that you're running into today that's maybe a little bit of a shift from what you saw 10 or 20 years ago.
Yes, and basically all my experience is dealing with the Florida Department of Education. But yeah, I mean, I keep everything, so I looked through old emails from like 2009, 2010, when, it was still the same party in power, so that's not what shifted. And I would ask for something, and very quickly, let me check on that for you. Yes, here it is. I requested documents about state testing. Here you go, a few days later. Well, you may remember this fall when Park Maitland School was told it could no longer accept state scholarships. The governor said, they have ties to communist China. Okay, that was kind of a shock, for a school that many of us probably regarded as a very well-known and admired private school. Anyway, I asked, they had 15 days to appeal, the school did, and I said, as soon as that 15 days was up, I said, may I have their appeal documents? Nothing. No answer, no acknowledgement that I asked for anything, nothing. And then, we kept asking. That was early October, November, December. Finally, at the end of January, they sent them. So, like you mentioned, a delay for no obvious reason, no explanation for the delay, just nothing. So that's kind of typical of what we're dealing with. Just things take much longer. And I'd say when I look at my old requests, there seemed to be a sense from the people who worked in the Public Information Office that my job is to provide the public information. If we have the records, we will look for them and we will give them to you. We're not trying to figure out what you're doing or what you want them for. They're public and we'll give them to you. And I will say, just to your point earlier, I did work in Virginia first, and when I first got to Florida, I was just blown away. Like, I just have to ask for something and they have to give it to me. This is amazing, because it wasn't like that in Virginia at all. So, I had that nice surprise, but now we're feeling like it's really a struggle often.
Right, we're now experiencing what so many other states could do. I remember going to journalism conferences and hearing other people talk and thinking, oh my goodness, right. I cannot believe this. And now we are in that boat. Bobby, like we mentioned at the top of the program, let's take just a minute to really help people understand how average people are using these laws every day. Can you share a little bit about what you hear from the non-journalists out there?
Okay, there's like so many places to go here. How many people in this room have ever filed a record request? Oh, there are quite a few. Most people often only have need to file a record request is usually if they're not engaged heavily in monitoring and playing a watchdog role with their local councils and commissions and boards, they tend not to until something happens. There's a problem, there's a development down the road. We have a hotline, the First Amendment Foundation operates a hotline, where once upon a time, the vast majority of the calls we would get would come from journalists. These days, I would say more than 90% of it comes from people who are not journalists. And the most interesting fact is, not that they call us, but just to also understand, the biggest filer of records requests is corporate America. Companies are the ones to file the most records requests of anybody, more than journalists, more than citizens. And there was a study recently done by the Breckner Center at the University of Florida that found if you were a corporation or a lawyer representing large business interests, surprise, your records get answered pretty quickly. If you're a journalist, an academic, a nonprofit, or an average citizen, be prepared to wait. Now, I would love, in the current environment, to blame the current government of the state and all the changes that are going on, but the fact of the matter is Florida's not alone. Public records are under siege all across the United States. The big difference is, in Florida, you have a constitutional right to records. And this is kind of sometimes a little bit hard to figure out when you call a records custodian and they treat you like they're doing you a favor or that you're somehow bothering them. Because the fact is, this is your right as a Floridian to have access to public information. And a lot of people do that. You get a lot of times, like I said, zoning. I want to know who's interested in that plot. If you know there's a board meeting coming up in 4 weeks and it takes you 5 months to get the records don't exist. And unfortunately, and I'm sure we'll get to it another time, the only way that we have to enforce these laws is to sue. And how many people in here would be able to hire a lawyer and apply it? And they know that. They know that most people don't have the ability. So this is in a large part how they've been able to get away with it.
And yeah, I think we've all seen that to some extent. I have personally run into a number of cases, including recently, and I want to say I still encounter a lot of public information officials, including here in Winter Park, who are excellent and are really doing their jobs and doing them well and trying to provide access to information. But I also find myself, including recently, in a position where I'm having to explain the law even to a police department who is supposed to be enforcing the law. They don't understand the exemptions. They don't make an effort to understand the exemptions. They believe they can use the exemptions in blanket fashion. And unless you have a First Amendment attorney to call on, it can be very hard to shake some of those documents to shake the documents loose, and oftentimes these are very much in the public interest. I'm sorry, Bobby, did you want to?
There's an important thing. Right now, everybody in this room and every public official has access to a document that's produced by the Attorney General's office and published in perpetuity. We have the rights to publish it, the Florida Government and Sunshine and Government Manual. And this is the rules. It's not hard to do. You can for $30, you can order it from us, or you can go online. So none of these officials have an excuse not to know the law. All they have to do is open the book or call the Attorney General's office, and yet they don't.
Right, yes. I run into it a lot where people really don't know the law. And sometimes there are agencies that don't deal with a lot of requests and they're confused and it just takes a few minutes to explain it. And other times it seems like there's a little more to it than that. And so, Leslie, I wanted to see and you've already spoken to this a little bit about the changing attitudes of record custodians, but I think we've certainly seen that in the DOE and probably even on the local level as well.
Yeah, I will say most of the local officials that I deal with, I feel like they're pretty responsive and provide what they're supposed to in a reasonable amount of time. I've had really maddening situations at least 3 times, I think, this school year, where we've finally gotten the state to say, okay, here's the records, this is what it will cost you. Then we've paid for it and not gotten the records. So, I've seen like, okay, my check cleared, because FYI, they don't take a credit card, so I have to pay with a personal check and mail it to Tallahassee. But then they cash it and nothing. And we've had to have our attorney then call and say, this is not compliant with the law. But to Bobby's point, we are lucky that we still have an attorney who can do that for us, but that may not be something that private citizens can access. So that's been a real change. Again, it takes months and months and months to get a cost estimate, then we pay it, and then we still wait months.
And that really actually sets up, thank you, our next question, because another way, besides just the pure delays or making things difficult, not responding to requests, phone calls, emails, is just the pure sticker shock. That often will deter a lot of people, especially just the average person running their HOA, looking for development information, whatever the case may be. So I think we've all been handed our share of eye-popping invoices for records. Bobby, you probably, you serve a little bit of as a clearinghouse for some of those, because I know people call you to complain about them. So tell us a little bit about what you're seeing. I know some are in, tens of thousands of dollars?
We just got someone who's trying to get information from the Port of Pensacola. He wants 15 records. Cost $400,000. $400,000. There's an old Tom Waits song where he talks about dreams aren't broken down here, they're just walking with a limp. And I think our public records laws are like that. I was always reluctant to say that they're broken because it tends to lead to despair. And, someone in my position, you don't want to lead despair. You want to give people hope. But there's a quote from the head of the Brechner Center who said something really good. He said, if the system requires the average person to hire an attorney to make democracy work, then it's really broken. And I think that that's really true. This is all a symptom. These huge bills that people get are a symptom of the fact that the system's not working correctly. And a lot of people know, once upon a time when journalists and newspapers would regularly sue, there was a lot of pressure on public records custodians to disclose. Without that, there's the old days used to say in Washington, D.C., when I worked up there, that there's a lot of incentive to no one has any incentive to give you information, because you can get in trouble. If you don't give any information, you can't get in trouble. And this seems to be what's pervading everything. Part of the problem is we don't have enough teeth in our laws. And I don't want to be up here and leading everyone to say it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. And I'm happy to talk about this in more detail. But we have been working with a few other information organizations. And our plan this year is to try to put some more teeth into the laws, create more financial penalties for delays, non-disclosure. But more importantly, we want to take some of the best practices that we see in Illinois, Washington, Pennsylvania, and create an office, a separate office of an independent adjudicator, so that if records are denied, you have a course of appeal rather than having to hire an attorney. Because it is the only way I think we're going to get anywhere, and I think it's the only way to re-democratize what was meant to be an important pole in the center of the tent. Remember, government transparency and public records are there to help make a stronger democracy. Without information and without things happening in the open, it's really hard to hold people to account, and it's really hard to have an informed opinion. So this is really important. We don't expect it's going to pass first time around, but it'll enable us to do more to get the word out about what's happening and to try to come up with a way to resolve it.
And Mike and Leslie, do either of you want to jump in with some of the cost requests you've seen?
$10,414, which I guess is a bargain now compared to what Bobby had, but that was...
Jump on it.
No, that was way too much money for us. And that was similar, that was looking for records related to private schools that take state scholarships or vouchers. It was similar to requests Beth and I had made together back in 2017. So it was hard to know for sure, but we figured based on what we paid back then, we should have maybe been charged $1,500, not $10,400. So, which we did not pay and could not pay. I mean, we had to narrow the request down to what we wanted to get it to a price.
Even $1,500 though is a lot of money.
Oh, it's a ton of money, right? But I mean, 10,000 was just. I almost fell out of my chair really when I saw that.
And I've had a few of the $1,000, $2,000. Sometimes that's on me. It encourages me to narrow my request, but that risks the possibility of missing something. But I'm dealing with one right now. It's emails from a state agency, and they wanted to charge me for 49 emails, $310, which breaks down to about $6 an email. And for my company, it may be doable, but if I'm going to my boss every 2 or 3 times a week saying, hey, I need another $300, $400, $200, I'm not going to be allowed to pursue those anymore, and those potential discoveries that we may make will suffer. And that's obviously something that anybody requesting public records, $300 is a lot of money for some folks to try to get some emails. And part of the reason these costs are going up is because under the law, the agencies are allowed to charge the labor costs of what it takes for them to review and redact these. And a lot of times now they're sicking some of their highest priced lawyers on those. And some of that may be to drive up the cost and discourage you from getting it. But the other reason are those 1,200 plus exemptions where you need a legal staff because in good faith, they don't want to accidentally release something that the law says they shouldn't release. Even in good faith, it's gumming up the system.
I think the laws of physics have less rules. I think the laws of physics have less rules, you know?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that too, where it used to be you pay that, because you have to pay the hourly wage for the redactions. It used to be a clerk, somebody.
Hourly wage plus benefits.
Right. And now it is like a $300 an hour attorney doing it instead of just one of the people in the office who you kind of know by name. That's how it used to be. So, Mike, I want to jump in real quick because I don't want to miss an opportunity to give a quick overview of the Washington Post lawsuit. Can you give us an update on that?
And this kind of dovetails in a lot of what we've been talking about here already.
People are still suing.
People are still suing. There's an active lawsuit going on in Leon County Circuit Court right now in Tallahassee. As you may recall, last year the Florida legislature passed a law that shielded the governor's travel records from public disclosure. Not just the governor, lieutenant governor, the chief justice of the Florida Supreme Court, the cabinet, visiting governors, and not just records created when this law was passed over the summer, but retroactively to the beginning of time. So if there's an old 1950s plane ticket somewhere, you can't get it. It applies to law enforcement agencies, and it's the Florida Department of Law Enforcement primarily handles the governor's travel and his security. Coincidentally, I had the chance to ask the governor about this directly before he signed the bill, and again, he said, this wasn't my idea, it's my advisors telling me that it's being done for my security, and the security, and there is a legitimate reason to want to protect security procedures. Washington Post last year requested some of the governor's travel records, his taxpayer-funded airplane flights when he was running for president. And FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, said no, so they sued. And the Washington Post, this is still going on, is arguing not only should we be entitled to these records under the existing law, but we believe that law shielding the travel records violates Florida's constitution. Well, what's interesting, in the course of this litigation, some now former FDLE employees have come forward, including the former chief of staff, who I was kind of happy because he validated my story from last year saying, yes, absolutely, the governor's office is delaying the release of these public records. We can't get them to folks in good faith because they're getting hung up in the governor's office. But secondarily, he's saying that We, FDLE, helped craft this law. We believe that the records the Washington Post wants actually would be allowed to be released, that they would not jeopardize the governor's security, and would actually help taxpayers understand how their money's being spent. And according to this former insider at FDLE, the governor's office intervened and their lawyers disagreed and overruled FDLE and said, no, you will not release those travel records to the Washington Post. In the court documents, the lawyers from FDLE make the argument that we have a right as lawyers to have conversations with the lawyers at the governor's office and debate whether these exemptions should apply. And the governor's office apparently won out on that battle so far, but it goes back to these exemptions, and now it gives fodder for these lawyers, perhaps in good faith, to argue whether we should be releasing these.
And it's not just his travel records, it's also the visitor log to the mansion. So anyone who goes to visit him, you want to know who visited him last week, those are exempt. And the other thing that I find, I'm really glad that the Washington Post is suing, but that's exactly the point. The point is, you're not seeing the Tampa Bay Times suing, you're not seeing the Miami Herald. It's a paper that still has money at a national level who's suing. And you have to remember, every lawsuit, the fact that they want us to sue, every time there's a lawsuit, you have to sue for a record and they're going to fight you, that comes out of our pocket. We're funding that directly one way or the other. And it's wrong. It's just simply wrong.
So let's shift gears just a touch. The other big piece of the Sunshine Law that I know is really important to so many of us is the open meetings provisions within the law. And we often hear about officials, quote, breaking the sunshine. That's not just withholding records, but that's having policy discussions outside of the open sunshine. And I know many, many people who go above and beyond to follow that, and it's very much appreciated. But we are seeing some changes there as well. Bobby, are you noticing any major trends on that front?
The problem with a lot of our sunshine laws are if you catch a city council meeting in private or having met with developers, say in private, because that's usually where a lot of problems come, and you call them out on it, they cure it. So what they do is they bring up the decision they already made a decision on, they bring it back up, everyone knows how everyone's going to vote, and they do it out in the open, and it's all fine and dandy when it's all done. So the good thing is at least there's a little bit of room where that can be forced. The biggest problem that we're seeing, and it's not really so much a sunshine violation, and this is the biggest level of complaints we have, is really speech. A lot of boards, councils, commissions have decided to put in, civil discourse rules, which in reality are just a way to limit public input into meetings. And if you, for instance, you can't get up, you can only speak to the chair. You can't address another publicly elected official. And if you do, you could be banned, or you could, maybe for a month, maybe for longer. You could have, there's stories of people turning off mics in the middle of public discourse when they don't like what people say. And that's what I'm seeing the biggest problem. You do have the occasional issue where you have people texting each other in meetings that they're not supposed to do. And, the problem is, once again, the disincentives are not very strong. The penalties really aren't there. Most of the time, I just mentioned how easy it is to fix a violation of Sunshine Law by having, making the same decision that you already made in private, making it publicly. The penalties are not really strong. So people are constantly pushing the envelope. And the other thing that you're also seeing that goes to everything, whether it's public records or open government, is it seems every board, every county, every city, there's no consistency. It reminds me, so much reminds me of that sketch on Monty Python for the 50-yard dash for people who don't know direction. They're all in a line and you shoot and everyone runs in their own way. And that's a lot. You know, it used to be Sunshine Week, newspapers and nonprofits would make the same record request to everybody all across the state. And what would be interesting, this is before the worst of things now, and one county would give it to you immediately, zero charge. The other county would drag their feet, never respond to you. The other county would say, we can give it to you, but it'll cost you $10,000. And the problem is, because it's largely all built on an honor system, in some cases you see it's like Dracula running the blood bank. They have their own interests, and this is the problem with a lot of accountability in open government, is the things that they do, the documents that they oversee, the decisions that they're making, if held up in a certain light, doesn't do their careers much good. So they don't have much interest in basically being accountable to their constituents. And again, I'd love to say this is a unique problem to Florida. I mean, we would be proud of it, but unfortunately this is happening all over the country. It just feels worse here because of our tradition, what everyone said, that you'd come here and you go, oh my God, this is information nirvana. We ain't in Kansas anymore, so that's the reality.
Yeah, and that's definitely true. I've experienced a lot of that, and I just want to say, as somebody who's sat through a lot of public meetings, I've seen a lot of examples where public comment has made a difference, and oftentimes your best elected officials really do take those comments into consideration. I've seen development projects altered as a result of those, even somewhat on the spot. So you certainly should not lose hope, and hopefully public engagement will remain high. Certainly very high here in Winter Park, I know that. So I want to get to a few more quick things before we run out of time. Could I get a piece of advice from each of you? If somebody out here is seeking themselves or knows someone who's seeking records, what type of advice would you give?
Be persistent. That's the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Don't get a restraining order. Don't get arrested. Tiptoe to that line, maybe, if you have and keep in mind that the record custodians themselves may be acting in good faith, and their hands are tied, sometimes by their lawyers or by their supervisors. But it's just persistence and letting them know your name and daily emails, and sometimes it doesn't work. A lot of times it doesn't work, but maybe you'll get lucky.
Leslie.
Yeah, I would say just keep doing it. I mean, I was going to shout out to a local group, the Florida Freedom to Read Project. They have been collecting from all public schools across the state which books have been pulled from the shelves. And they've gotten a huge amount of information. That was just a group started by, several local parents concerned what was going on. I don't think they had any background in this, but they just keep filing requests, and then they pass them on to me. They've passed them on to the Miami Herald. They've said, look at this list of so many books that have been.
And they're all online.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that's just been an example of local folks just being super persistent and learning the laws as they go and filing requests. And so, yeah, at some point, just trying will get you something, hopefully.
Often, when I was running a newsroom, the reporters, every record request was like all of a sudden you're whisked up and transported to a carnival with a little mallet in your hand and you're playing whack-a-mole, And there's a tendency when you ask, let's say you ask for a contract, and they say there is no contract. So you have to ask for every kind of euphemism for contract that you can think of: memorandum of understanding, memorandum of agreement, deal. And you come up, and what ends up happening is what you really wanted gets lost in this growing net that you provide. And a lot of times, one of the reasons that you have records custodians able put big price tags on things is because your net's too broad. You're pulling back too much stuff. One of the most clever things I ever heard when someone wanted emails, they would ask for screenshots of all the responses because there's nothing really to redact in those, and he can pretty much go through the screenshots and go, that's BS, that one I'd like. So it helps him narrow it. So think of it as an Eskimo talks about a whale. If you're going to ask for a blue whale, it's going to be a lot. So the information you want to do is you want to do it in bite-sized chunks. Try to limit it as much as you can when you make your request. Don't make, I want any and every communication, written, texts, emails, because you're requiring more time for research, and you're likely going to get a lot of stuff that you don't need, but they're going to charge you for it. So try to narrow your focus, try to figure out what is it that you really want, and start small, and then build from there. We have some templates soon to be online. We're going to be releasing a guide to how to be a defender of Sunshine, and it will have a lot of advice, including templates. Right now, they're available, but you have to reach out to us. We have a hotline. In the back over there, there's all the pamphlets which can tell you how to find us and donate to us. We dance for our dinner. But that, in my opinion, is one of the most important things, is try to keep your requests manageable. And then you may want a lot of stuff, but start like with that whale, just one bite, and then go to the next bite after that.
And, we've all kind of referenced this along the way here, but one of the most frustrating things, we've said this a few times now, is when you do run into a roadblock, really the only recourse is to file a lawsuit if they stop negotiating with you. So I know the First Amendment Foundation is working on a proposal. Can you tell us a little bit about what that proposal would do?
It's a long, complicated thing that we've worked on and we're narrowing it down, but effectively what it would do is all delays are not mischievous. They're not all because of bad intent. Some records custodians' offices are woefully understaffed. They don't have the right person in there. Once upon a time, they would be able to refer someone to have some experience, and it wouldn't have to go to the county lawyer or the city lawyer, or it wouldn't have to be the sheriff, wouldn't have to personally be involved. But they don't staff the offices well, and so sometimes they're just overwhelmed. The other thing is, I talked about earlier, how companies are the biggest requesters, and often their requests suck up a lot of bandwidth. Now, right now our laws are not very precise. What is the amount of time? Here's a little quiz. I hate these. What is the amount of time that a records custodian has to respond to your records request? Answer: a reasonable amount of time. And reasonable can depend on what universe you're from, right? So, and then the other thing is, the only way, the other teeth in our law was always that if you sued, I'm going to sue you, that you would be able to recover your costs and fees, so that it would be a disincentive. But as fewer and fewer people even have enough money to get out the gate and launch a lawsuit, and we do help people with referrals. We do that. We do help people when their appeals come. So what we want to do is we want to chalk up when it's not due to staffing issues, but due to, when there's language in there that I don't recall because my brain doesn't work like a lawyer's, which I think is probably a good thing. After a certain period of time, the fees start chalking up, so that it becomes more expensive for them in the end to do that. And then the most important thing I think we do would be the introduction of what I think we're calling an ombudsman's office that would work out of the state attorney's office, which would be in charge of they would review denials and make decisions. And so it would mean that you have a little bit more, you don't have to go to a lawsuit out of the gate. So those are the main things that we're trying to do. There was a little bit of legislation that kind of hinted at this. Ours will be a little bit more. We've got to find, by bipartisan support for it, which I think we can do, because I think this issue really affects everybody. One of the great things about working in the First Amendment is it's probably the last federal institution that I'm aware of that has support from everybody, and not necessarily for the right reasons. A lot of it has to do with fear and selfishness. But, you know, what I have to say and what I want to listen to is important. What you want to, not so much. But that drives the fear and the selfishness.
Yeah, and I think that ombudsman model has worked well in other states. And it's
Illinois, Washington, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut.
Yes, okay, so Illinois, Pennsylvania, Washington, Connecticut. I want to say Maryland might have had one at one point.
Maryland is it's better than what we have, but it doesn't. But Illinois, Washington, and Connecticut are really good.
Okay, so those are great examples because it is nice to have someone to call for advice, guidance, support, etc. when your request is denied, besides just an attorney. So before we open up to other questions, just real quick, I would love to hear from each of you, rapid fire. What is one thing people here or tuning in with us can do to help brighten the sunshine, improve access to information?
I'm impressed with something like this. This helps. Voters love to talk about the hot button issues: immigration, crime, development, growth, roads. You don't get a lot of folks going, public records! And I want you all to just, and I love the fact that there's elected officials here. Let them know that we see them. I can honestly say there's some elected officials in this room that have some of the very best public records staff. And my fear is that they will turn to the dark side as some of the others have. So, and you do worry that if these agencies are doing it, why should I? But I think it's just letting our elected leaders know that this is important to us, because we can't have any of those other discussions about immigration or roads if we don't have the public records to have those educated discussions.
Yeah, I was pretty much going to say what Mike said. I think that's the answer. And I just wanted to circle back to something you said at the beginning, which is it's not just for reporters. I mean, records do provide information for everybody, and this wasn't in Florida, but my husband's mother was adopted when she was a baby. That was back in the 1930s, so of course all the records were closed. But now, thanks to the laws that allow you to get them, we were able to get her original birth certificate and see what her birth name was and see her birth mom's name, and they, you know, he and his sister now have that bit of information, and so accessing records was just useful to them on a personal level. So it's not just us reporters who want it.
Public records, it's not for reporters anymore. I would say the advice that I would give everybody in this room is surrender to curiosity. Find something that you're interested in and make a public record. If everyone who's done a public record, bravo. For those of you who haven't, figure it out, try it out. Call us up, I'll give you a template. You know, we'll make a public record request, get firsthand experience of what it's like. Also, one other thing I wanted to say earlier that I didn't say is, someone else did, don't get mad. That doesn't help you. You know, it never works. But you also have to know that a lot of the exemptions that are on the books were not necessarily designed with bad intent. A lot of them had good intentions, but they didn't see the downside of what they were doing. There was one reason they wanted to pass a record exemption without realizing the knock-on effect. So when you run across these exemptions, the other thing that's really important to know is that exemptions are discretionary, okay? It doesn't mean, so if, I'll give you a quick example. There's an incident in a jail and the sheriff's people did the right thing, and he wants to show everybody, because he didn't do anything wrong, that his people did the right thing, that he releases the records. He can do that even though he has an exemption saying he's not supposed to do that. So exemptions are discretionary. So just because someone says you can't have it doesn't mean that's a final word. You can appeal back to say, could you reconsider? So the only way you're really going to understand this, both the limits of it and the freedom of it, is try it yourself. Yeah. And if you run into problems, that's what we're here for. And those pamphlets are over there.
That's right. All right. Thank you, all of you, so much. I'm going to turn this over to Gina now for some audience Q&A.
Thank you so much, and what a great discussion. Thank you, panelists, so much. A good discussion. At this point, the mic is open to ask one question. One. So if you have questions for the panels, please come forward. Scott? I'm going to hold the mic. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to go back to the open meeting provision of Sunshine. We elect our boards, our commissions, our councils to be problem solvers. And when they only meet every 2 weeks and they can't talk to each other outside of being on the dais in public, does that negatively affect that board or commission or council's ability to make informed decisions? I've led and participated in many teams throughout my lifetime, my work experience, and if the only time I could talk to my teammates was every 2 weeks in public, I don't think I could have gotten a lot of stuff done.
I've heard the complaint often from elected officials, and I understand the complaint. That said, those are the rules of the game. You don't like the rules, there's ways we have to kind of alter them, but if those are the rules of the game, and you do have people that you've got staff that can work issues, you've got your county attorneys, your city attorneys. Government has survived doing this with these rules for a while, and the earth didn't open up and swallow Winter Garden or Winter Park, and so there are ways to do it. And I understand that it's an inconvenience, but there are a lot of democratic rules and regulations that are a pain in the ass. Autocracy is a lot easier.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Judy Hayes, and I'm a person who tends to serve a lot of public records requests. I've worked with Leslie Postal on a couple of them. Most of them are education related. So my question is, are you seeing any difference in electronic records keeping, like say social media records? If you have an elected official who's managing a social media account, then their direct messages would be subject to this request. And ostensibly, that shouldn't be very labor intensive. You don't have somebody sitting there like sifting through boxes at $300 an hour. It's a simple Boolean search. So are you seeing compliance? Are you getting better return on your requests on electronic media is my question.
My experience is you will request, as you pointed out, that a government official using their personal cell phone to conduct official agency business is public record. I love new elected officials because they don't realize that at first, and they are so open and candid. After they realize it, that shuts down. So that first time is great. But I am surprised though that how many times I will specifically request text messages, instant messages, and get nothing back. And you have to trust not only the agency record custodian, did they do the job to go harass this person? You have to trust the individual who is the keeper, maybe on their personal Facebook page of those instant messages, to turn them over. It just came out, there was some litigation between Walt Disney World and what the former Reedy Creek Improvement District, now CFTOD, a public records lawsuit saying that they didn't have procedures in place to extract that kind of data from personal electronic devices as employees were departing the agency. And so, yeah, when you don't get anything, you're suspicious. And
especially if you happen to have sent them a text message or an email that had maybe a keyword in it, and then you've requested that keyword, and you don't even get that. But again, you're right back to having to sue to enforce compliance.
I had I believe it, an elected official who was not saving his text messages, and his general counsel had to admit to me, yeah, he just didn't know the rules and deleted them. And part of it's education.
Remember, our public records laws were drawn up with the whole notion of inspection. You would go to your local office and say, can I see these records? The law really is caught behind the digital advances we've made, and often I find that the experience I had both as a journalist and now watching other people's experiences, that the digital thing has not sped this up or made it easier. In some ways, it introduces all kinds of complications, such as, you have a Facebook account, that's your official Facebook account. You can remove comments, but you can't delete them. But how would someone know to ask for them if they can't see them? I think we need to update our laws in a lot of ways, because if you really want to freak out your record custodian, tell them you want to come by at Friday at 3 to inspect what you're asking for, and you'll see it's amusing.
We have time for one more question. So, Christine?
Yes, I'm Chris Lanning, member of the League, and I have never submitted a public records request, so I'm learning. My question is, are there a lot of duplications of public records requests? I would think on major events there might be, and if so, is there any kind of a clearinghouse where that request could be made one time and then distributed to all the people that need to know that information?
Yeah, I would say the smartest agencies tend to do that. If there's a major event, they will create a website and start posting public documents that they know they're going to receive requests from every television station, every newspaper station, and they will make that information available not just to the reporters, but anyone, of course, who looks there. So we do see that, and that's certainly a great thing for them to do. We see a lot of city governments, county governments have great websites where they post information to make it readily available to people. So there is a lot out there without having to specifically ask for it. However, we still have to ask for a lot of the things, which are often the things they don't want you to have access to.
Right, and one thing that I've heard from people from our hotline is you request a record, they charge you $200, but they've already redacted it, they've already researched it, they've already found it. So when your friend requests the same record, in theory it should be free, but they charge them $300. So you see this. I'm not saying every municipality or every county or every board does this, but it's not uncommon.
I've been asked to ask one more question by our president. What can we, as League of Women Voters of Orange County, do to keep the sun shining? I mean, the solar eclipse was the other day, and at most it was 4 minutes, so what can we do?
Support our legislation when it comes up. The law needs a revamp, and this is the first stab at it. And we would really, we think public outcry, I think, always helps, and at least it tends to focus. Call your representatives, your senators, call your commissioners, tell them that you believe in public records. I think all these things are important.
And realize when these laws were crafted and it was put into our state constitution, it was a really great thing. And for a time, it was a really great thing, and it is something to live up to, and we just want to keep staying that way and not going in the other direction. And it's up to the people and the elected leaders to keep that, and us to enforce it and call them out on it when they don't.
All right, well, thanks to the three of you, absolutely. This was such a pleasure for me. And thanks to everyone here. Sadly, we have to bring this to an end. Tiffany, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Can we get one more round of applause for our moderator and our panelists this afternoon? Thank you, of course, to our moderator, Beth Kassab, and our panelists, Leslie Postal, Mike DeFrost, and Bobby Block. Excellent conversation. It has certainly been a terrific discussion. We all know that corruption flourishes in the dark and undermines democracy. We hear it, we see it in the lack of our news, or it taking just a little longer to get that story than it needs to. So as we say, knowledge is power. And if that is the case, then we as citizens should be fighting for open access to public records. We want to know what's going on, and certainly our journalists help us do that. And we can do that by taking some action. I hope that after today's discussion, it feels a little sunnier in the Sunshine State, but that is going to require us to do something, to get activated, certainly as Bobby mentioned, but also if we need public records requests to be persistent. I know I do that certainly as a business owner when I need records for one thing or another. And as it relates to the league, be informed, be engaged, support our First Amendment Foundation. Again, that table is in the back as well. Support those efforts to amend the public records law before, so that they can define reasonable time. What does that even mean exactly? And provide accountability for non-compliance. And then separately, because there is so much happening in the state of Florida, we want to make sure that we head to our Yes on 4 rally to end the 6-week abortion ban at Lake Eola this Saturday at noon. I hear that activists are coming on buses and planes and trains and motorcycles. So make sure that you are there, and so that we send a yes message by attending. It is election season. I will say that a million more times between now and November. If you have capacity, please volunteer as a poll worker in the 2024 election. If you are bilingual, we especially need you. And something that I learned, our polls have to be staffed by equal representation, equal party representation. And so we want to make sure that we are being of service to our community. So please make sure, if you have capacity to volunteer, contact Mary Montanez. I'm not sure if she's in here, but she usually is, and we'll get you all the information for our poll workers. We certainly need folks of every political affiliation. Also visit the Digital Democracy Project table in the back to my right, your left. And as we are talking about elections, the City of Orlando District 5 election will be held on Tuesday, May 21st. And the qualifying for candidates is Tuesday, April 16th. I got a little note that in the last 3 elections, the highest turnout was just a tad over 2,300 of about a 25,000 person registered voters. If you know someone who wants to run in District 5, or you know someone who lives in District 5, please implore them to turn out. Something about City of Orlando seats, they don't have term limits. And so we expect that whoever's in the seat, they're going to sit there a long time, and we want to make sure that they're a great representation of the people that are in that district, and that the people make their voice heard. So please make sure to tell someone, again, if they're in District 5, to make sure to turn out. On May 21st, we asked for your feedback for today's event. I hear that last month got a lot of feedback, so we want to make sure that you scan the QR code on the screen above, and you tell us what you thought about this event, how we can make it better, other topics that you may want to hear, etc. We really want to hear from you. Of course, thank you for our lovely meal today from Cuisinaires and the Winter Park Event Center. I personally love looking at this view. I would just say, take a look behind you. It's beautiful. To TJ of X-Ray Studios for filming and editing Hot Topics week after week and making it available at our lwvoc.org and on our league YouTube channel. Thank you so much. TJ's always in the back. Our extended discussion, Hot Topics Overtime, will immediately follow our panel today next door at the Winter Park Library Edith Bush Institute on the first floor, beginning at 1:15 until 2, moderated by the one and only Charlie Williams and Bob Shaw as well. And I will say a few announcements, but it's kind of a lot. I am very excited to introduce our May hot topic: abortion on the ballot and off limits. We'll have a great panel for next month. Flyer to come. Dr. Catherine Berryman, she is a board-certified OBGYN specializing in complex pregnancy management. Taylor Aguilar, Floridians, she's an organizer for Floridians Protecting Freedom. Amy Weintraub, Reproductive Rights Program Director for Progress Florida. And Kate Thompson, she is the Senior Director of Public Affairs at Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida. And the moderator is none other than yours truly, and I'm very excited to be moderating this discussion, particularly at a time like this in Florida. It is certainly sure to be a huge event, so do make sure to register early. Our annual meeting is coming up this Saturday, April 13th, from 9 to noon, 9 to 12 at the Winter Park Community Center. Again, the rally on Yes for 4 this Saturday, immediately after, 12 to 2. We want to make sure that we get our business done, and we also get over to the rally, so I hope we can all get over to Lake Eola together. Politics on Tap, which is held by our Rollins College students, will be on April 25th from 5 to 6. I will say I was a panelist at last month's Politics on Tap at Rollins, and those students have an amazing format. It was informative. They engaged students. They engaged teachers. There were over 100 students there. They did a little Gen Z Jeopardy. It was very well run by our students, so I absolutely encourage you, if you have some time, to get over there and support them. And then we have Orlando Super Saturday, April 20th from 10 a.m. to 5 at the University Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, and all invitees are welcome to attend. If you are not a member of the League, please join us. We'd love to have you. I always say, find the committee that you are most passionate about and join that one. Join many if you'd like, but at least join one. Your community will be so greatly impacted for it. If you'd like to volunteer, donate, bring a friend, come see me. And with that, if there are no further announcements, we are adjourned. But thank you all so much for being here this afternoon.